Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Greater Cincinnati's presentation event. We will be hearing from the Cincinnati Preschool Promise team this evening, their annual report from 2020 to 2021. So I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It's just great to see everybody this chilly, almost winter day. So just to kind of frame what's going on this evening, the League's Education Committee is serving tonight as your official host for this presentation. We have invited members throughout the League to participate. I'm sure people will join as they can. Hope is recording this, so this will be great for our membership to see. But as you all know, the Cincinnati Preschool Promise got started in 2016 with the passing of the $48 million levy, which included $15 million for preschool expansion. And that effort is shared by this team, the CPP team, as well as the Cincinnati Public School preschool program. And so we're excited about that. It's important to us as League members because we are very focused on education and high quality education for our children. And then as taxpayers, we want to make sure that our dollars are being spent in the right kind of way and with the intent of the levy. We're excited also too that we, the taxpayers, then turned around in 2020 and renewed said levy. And so we're good for another 5 years of providing high quality preschool for our children in the Cincinnati Public School District. So I'm not going to belabor it long. I'm going to introduce Shara Fisher-Jackson as the CEO of Preschool Promise. She and her team is here. I'll let you, Shara, introduce your team. We're going to hear from them, hear about the wonderful work that's being done by this team and by the wonderful providers that we have in our community. We have a lot of caring people who have been doing this work, some of them for decades, caring for our little ones and making sure that they're kindergarten ready. So we're going to hear about that work. And then we'll entertain questions on the annual report and any other aspect of Preschool Promise this evening. And the plan is to wrap this up around 6 o'clock so we can get to our dinners. Amen. So with that, I'll pass it on to Shara.
So thank you so much. We are so pleased to join you all again. I think it has been about a year since we made our last presentation, and it was right before the successful passage of the levy. I want to start though by turning it over to our marketing and communications director, Ms. Laquisa. This is her specialty. She's going to introduce our team and do the setup for us of what we're going to talk about. And I would really urge all of you, please join us by putting questions in the chat, using the raise your hand feature at any time. This is an intimate group, and we are all, every member of our team is always so excited and energized to talk about the Preschool Promise. And we all have a story that we want to share and tell of our outcomes and what we're doing, but we also want to be responsive to the things that are most interest to you as well. So we would encourage you to ask questions and make this an interactive so that opportunity so that we make sure we cover all of those things that are near and dear to each of you. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Ely.
Good evening, everyone. So glad to be with you. Once again, my name is Laquisa Ely. I am the Community Engagement and Marketing Manager for the Cincinnati Preschool Promise. And to be honest with you, I think Marcia did an excellent job of just telling everyone who we are and what we do. So I won't prolong it. But one of those key factors that I want to let you know about our mission is really that we provide access to high quality education preschools to ensure that every child in the city of Cincinnati will have be prepared for kindergarten. That's the most key part of the work that we do, preparing our babies to get ready for kindergarten. As you have already heard, you will hear from our executive director, right after I speak. Then you'll hear from Kanitra, who is our evaluations and program manager. And now after that, you will hear from one of our partners that has actually conducted our analysis or evaluation. That is Dr. Kalana Hindert. So we hope that you will actually join in. As many may or may not know, we are a small group. And when I mean small, it is a very, very small group, but we're doing a mighty work of thousands. How about that? I like the way we put that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Shara. Like I said, Marcia, I give you high fives, thumbs up for doing an excellent job about what where we came from, where we are, and where we're going beyond the mission and purpose of educating our babies and making sure that our small business owners that are taking care and educating our babies are prepared to get them ready for kindergarten. Shara, it is up to you, and I give you the floor.
Thank you so much. If we would advance to our very first slide, it gives an overview and additional details about who we are as an organization. You've heard about our history and how we're funded, a little bit about the mission and vision, but also the structure of who we are as an organization. We have a 15-member board of managers, and we are proud to say that Ms. Marcia Futel is one of our board of manager members that are nominated by CPS, Cincinnati Public School System, United Way, and Promise Forward. It's also important when you know who the Cincinnati Preschool Promise is. It is more than 200 providers in the community that make up the CPS network. We also have 4 standing boards that provide oversight for the work that we do and 2 ad hoc committees, and that we have a team that is growing every day of ambassadors that go out in the community and talk about the opportunities that are available with the Preschool Promise, as well as an intimate group of provider council members who are active, engaged providers who also serve as a special kind of ambassador to give direct feedback to the Preschool Promise on how our work is advancing, what we need to know on the front lines of the field, and also support of their peers and carrying out the message to all those providers as well. It's important to remember that this is a partnership with Cincinnati Public Schools, and all the work that we do is governed by a somewhat detailed master agreement that is focused on proper public use of preschool expansion dollars that is actually up for renewal this year. On the next slide, you will see a snapshot of the work that we have kind of done this year. We like to do impact numbers for 2021. You'll hear the detailed of each one of these impact numbers with our external evaluation process as well. But these are our ABCs of the Preschool Promise to talk about access, building partnership, and contributing to an equitable workforce. We're proud to say we have over 760 students who receive tuition assistance. We also had a special summer extended learning session with 352 students participating, 115 preschools who were eligible for tuition assistance, and 119 who are working to improve their quality. For those of you who may not know, Ohio has a step up to quality system where we've determined that just licensure and the ability to operate is not enough. What we want is a high quality education for each one of our students that has developmentally appropriate materials and supplies on a quality rating system from 1 star to 5 stars. We encourage all of the providers in the CPS footprint to be in part of quality improvement to get at least that 1 star and 2 star and aim for 3, 4, or 5 stars to reach high quality. You'll also see some of our teacher pilot initiatives on that education workforce with Teacher Promise grants and staff support funds. Those are resources and dollars that have been invested to make sure that we can recruit, retain, and make wages equitable for the early childhood education workforce. And you will see some of the numbers too here that have happened since the levy. So this is the combined efforts of our work of more than 28,000 hours of coaching. We have 92 sites that started in quality improvement with less than 3 stars, who not only reached high quality with 3 or more stars, but also actively enrolled students to make sure they could get a high quality education. And we've put an additional 1,105 high quality seats into the early childhood education system. right? You'll also see a breakdown of how our resources have been spent since the initiation of the levy. We are always proud to say that we have a minimum of 75% of all of those dollars going directly to programmatic initiatives, right? Tuition assistance, quality improvement, and sustaining quality, which are those teacher and workforce initiatives. We did not have the KRA administered last year, which is Ohio's statewide test to determine kindergarten readiness. This figure that you see, that 78.4% of preschool showed up to school ready to learn when they entered kindergarten, is from the 2019-2020 test, right? COVID did not permit that test to be administered last year. So you'll hear some things from the evaluation team that talk about progress that we did measure. We anticipate being back on track with the test being administered this fall so that we will have results about readiness again when we complete the evaluation for year 5. On the next slide, you will also see some additional information about evaluation. Every year, we are very careful to make sure that we can always talk about how great we are, but that we have an external source to do that. Who leads our evaluation efforts is Kenitra Mathis, and I will let her talk to you about that external evaluation and also introduce our evaluation partners.
Thank you so much, Shara. So as Shara mentioned, we work very closely with our partners at Innovations, who each year works with us to take a deep dive into our work to help us tell our story and demonstrate and communicate the impact of our tuition assistance and of our quality improvement programs, and also for all the initiatives we have here at Cincinnati Preschool Promise. What you have in front of you is the 3 evaluation reports that they were able to produce for us this year. Our year 4 evaluation, our provider, parent, and teacher perspective evaluation, and our teacher and provider wage analysis report. These are all available on our website for you in a digital format if you would like to look at them. We hope you'll be able to look at them and pull out a lot of information to tell you our story, to hear about our providers and the work and the outcomes of our staff here, the hard work of our community providers, and what we're doing here at Cincinnati Preschool Promise. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kalana Hendrick to tell you more about the results of our year 4 evaluations for Cincinnati Preschool Promise. Dr. Kalana.
Thank you so much, Kenitra. I'm glad to be here to talk about so many successes this year. As Shara mentioned earlier, there typically is a kindergarten readiness assessment administered by the Cincinnati Public School District every year. But this year there was a different type of assessment administered. It's called Acadience Reading. So a key feature of the evaluation every year is to understand how participation in Cincinnati Preschool Promise in that high quality education impacts kindergartners with their readiness and with their performance. So this year we looked at early literacy readiness via the Acadience Reading Assessment. And what we did is compare the performance of students who had participated in CPP and those who had no CPP experience coming into kindergarten. Next slide. So here you'll see a couple notes on the samples that we looked at and the demographics. So many of the demographics for the CPP and non-CPP kindergartners were essentially the same. The CPP cohort did have a slightly higher percentage of Black students, and the non-CPP cohort had a higher percentage of SES4. So I will talk a little bit more about how we look at socioeconomic status in a moment, but these are the students who are in higher socioeconomic status. But when we looked at overall performance, we found that those who had participated in CPP did have, they actually met the benchmark or exceeded the benchmark more frequently than those who did not have CPP experience. So 51.4% versus 50.1%. Next slide, please. Okay, and then we further looked at these results by race as well. So again, we're comparing CPP kids with non-CPP kids. And we found really even further advantages for CPP participation among Black students, Hispanic students, and multiracial students. And you can see the percentages there. It really just shows how CPP is reaching students with some of the greatest need. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned socioeconomic status before. What we do is we look at neighborhoods and we place them into quartiles of socioeconomic status. So we use what's called neighborhood risk factors. These measures come from the American Community Survey, and then we rank neighborhoods using some of these factors. So we might look at median family income, poverty rate, SNAP eligibility rate. And what's important to remember here is that the quartiles are based on the general socioeconomic makeup of the neighborhoods rather than being attached to individual families. So next slide, please. So we looked at the results by SES quartiles as well, and we found a really dramatic finding in SES1. So those would be the students with the greatest need that come from families with lower incomes and more challenges. Those students who attended CPP were at above the benchmark 52.9% of the time, compared to only 29% of their non-CPP cohort. I mean, this is really a major and very strong significant difference of 23.4%. So again, it really shows the impact of CPP, especially amongst those students who really need help the most. Next slide, please. We also wanted to look at how attendance in these high quality programs affects performance. So here we're looking at all students who attended CPP, and we found that those students who attended at least 90% or more of the days that they should have attended were at or above those performance benchmarks 58.3% of the time, compared to those who did not attend at least 90%. There was only 47.2%. So again, it shows that dosage matters, right? The more frequently students can attend these high quality programs and get that instruction really impacts the way they perform at the next level. Next slide. Another way we looked at this was by understanding some of the differences in performance for students who were able to attend some sites they were able to reopen during the pandemic. So we're all probably know that during the pandemic, everything had to shut down. Well, with the support of CPP, 45 providers were able to obtain licensure to open back up and serve those families who were considered emergency workers. So we decided to look at their performance as well. We found that students who attended the pandemic sites during that time were at above the benchmark at a higher frequency compared to those who didn't. So it really just speaks to continuous learning, another measure of impact of how important it is to continue to get that dosage. So we saw that when there were interruptions, that their performance suffered a bit. So there was a difference of about 13.9%. Next slide. So another feature that we looked at that was kind of new this year was trying to understand how preschoolers are progressing in preschool, right? So we've looked at for about 3 or 4 years how students perform in kindergarten. We wanted to see what was going on in preschool. So this year we looked at 2 assessments, the ELA and the TS Gold. These 2 assessments were chosen because they were used broadly across many preschool sites, and they had many common domains such as social foundations, literacy, math measures. And what we did was evaluate the progress of preschoolers from their fall assessments to their spring assessments to understand if they were making progress. Next slide. So we actually have data for 2 years. So for the 19-20 year, we saw that preschoolers made progress from fall to spring in 4 of the domains. And you can see them here: social, emotional, physical, language and literacy in math. And next slide, please. And then again, in the most recent year that we have data for, we saw again very strong performance and improvements from fall to spring in the same domains, with even stronger gains in math this year. So that really goes to show that progress is being made in preschool, and we've seen that progress carry over to kindergarten as well. Next slide, please. So Shara mentioned earlier, and I talked a little bit earlier about the extended learning session. So this was offered to parents during the months of June through August. And what it really did was support learning and kind of prevent some of those gaps that sometimes happen over the summer. And again, we saw a really significant difference in those children who attended ELS were at above that literacy benchmark more frequently than those students who did not attend that ELS session. So again, there's more evidence for that continuous learning, higher dosage of learning at those high quality improvement sites. Next slide, please. Okay, and we also looked at the children in the ELS sessions and broke their participation and their performance down by race. And similar to the early literacy performance, we did see additional gains amongst Black students, Hispanic students, and multiracial students. Next slide. And here, which was a really powerful result as well, we did see performance differences in all of the SES categories. So no matter if students were lower income or higher income, participation over the summer in the ELS session did make a difference in performance in kindergarten. Next slide, thank you. So this slide really speaks to some of the satisfaction that parents who have enrolled their children in these programs have expressed. We conducted focus groups and surveys with parents, and as you can see, they are very satisfied with their CPP experience, from the options to the tuition assistance, the communication. Many of them found the application process very easy. Next slide. We also wanted to understand, for those teachers and providers who are enrolled in the CPP network, how satisfied were they with various forms of communication from CPP? Again, across the board, pretty high satisfaction across all the parents, teachers, and providers as well. Next slide. And we always ask this question pretty specifically of parents, and it really captures the impact of tuition assistance and how it aids in access to high quality programs. We asked parents, would you have been able to afford preschool had you not received CPP tuition assistance? And nearly half of parents would not have been able to afford any of the costs. About 26.1% of the parents could only have afforded some of the costs without this program. So just think about the significant differences of children who would be missing out on high quality preschool education had this program not been in existence. Next slide, please. All right, we talked about COVID-19 a little bit, but CPP has really been a source of strength and support for providers, teachers, parents, and really the community during the pandemic. They've offered resources and support, providing various COVID-related grants and aid. Many of the providers, like I mentioned, were able to obtain licenses to provide care. Step Up to Quality and other professional development programs were continued with the support of CPP online, so that providers could keep progressing and keep their star ratings high. Next slide. So, taking everything into consideration, CPP had a really strong performance. These recommendations are kind of like just suggestions for CPP to continue to doing these things, engaging with parents as they have been in the community, enrolling additional providers, assistant providers continuing to assist them with any challenges that come up from the pandemic or enrolling preschoolers, and just reaching as many tuition assistance eligible preschoolers as possible in our region. Next slide. And then we made a few additional recommendations just to continue to support providers during uncertainty, to extend the learning sessions. As we saw, there was really strong data coming out from the initial session that we should continue to try to offer year-round and continuous learning. And CPP has been a really strong advocate and support for teacher and their wages. There are 2 really strong wage initiatives that are going on and being examined and enhanced every year to support the teachers and providers in the network. Next slide. So any questions about this evaluation piece?
You are feel free to ask any questions. I know that was a plethora of information about some of the work that we have done in 2020 and 2021. So feel free, if you're not eager or camera shy, you can put your questions in the chat box and we'll be able to answer the best to our ability, and if it's not tangible in our hands right now, because let me tell you, we work hard in the city of Cincinnati. We work really hard. So feel free to ask any questions. Even if you don't see it here, that doesn't mean that the work is not being done. These are just a few points of the work that we felt was high level to address your organization. So there's no question, even you don't see it, please ask away.
Laquisa, I have a question, and it's not about the data itself, but understanding what type of feedback do parents get from when their children undergo these assessments. I've been out of the preschool game for a long time. So what do they typically find out about how well their children are performing? I mean, just in general. Do they get reports from schools, or, is it in a way that they can understand?
Understood.
I'll take that one. If that's, I will say that yes, just like most of people experience with the K through 12, preschool providers do have regular meetings with parents and inform them of what they need to know, particularly if they're at a high quality site, because that's one of the domains that help them reach the stars that maintain high quality, is their interaction and communication and engagement with parents. Right. So those regular communication avenues with parents are an essential part of the lesson plan and what every preschool provider does. There is also a portfolio that every preschool provider builds for a child when they graduate from preschool. As they're ready to enter kindergarten, the parents are entrusted with that information that does a marker and a level of every kind of developmentally appropriate practice and thing that the child is ready to do. All of that and concise information travels with the child to kindergarten. So parents always have a good idea where their children are faring. And, I think every preschool provider prides themselves on understanding that this educational trajectory is a partnership with the parents. And what we say at the preschool level is every environment is a learning environment. Right. And everyone has someone to contribute to that. So that is part of why we started our Smart Start Pack, which was the brainchild of Laura Carr, who's a member of our team in communications and public relations. And that is because parents asked us for tools that they can use with their children outside of the classroom. Right. So a Smart Start Pack has many of the supplies that you would see in a preschool classroom so that they can be used at home, in the car, when people are traveling back and forth, when they visit grandma's house. All of those things go with them because the acknowledgement that everything they see, touch, feel, do, and play with is part of their social emotional development and learning. And those markers are reviewed with parents on a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Shara. I do have a question. There is a question that was posed in the chat. I believe this will be your, Shara. If not, I think it will go to Dr. Hinder. The question is, it says, what percentage of students in Cincinnati enter kindergarten ready to learn, regardless of CPP or other? So I don't know if you would like to handle that, Shara. That's up to you, or you want us to go to Dr. Hinder.
I'll take a try at it. And Dr. Hinder, if you could back me up, what I will say to you is I don't have the data ready available for all of Cincinnati students. We can pull it from the state site. We do have it available from the control group that Innovations may have used. What I can tell you is the origination of the Preschool Promise came from the last decade, never having more than 50% of children show up kindergarten ready in the CPS footprint. That was one of the impetus for starting the Preschool Promise. What that number is now, we can pull from statewide data, and maybe Dr. Hinder can tell us what the control group looked like 2 years ago.
If we can go back, Laquisa, almost to the beginning of my presentation, and this won't be the exact number because this isn't the KRA that we're looking at this year. This was for the Acadience reading. Go back a couple more slides. Another slide. Few more. Okay, if we can stop here. So the first thing I'll say is when we look at KRA data, the gap between performance for CPP and non-CP is much wider than it is here. So the impact of attending CPP is much stronger when you look at overall kindergarten readiness. But if we just look at the numbers here, there's more than 2-to-1 ratio of non-CPP kindergartners to CPP kindergartners. And if we think about the fact that when we look at kindergarten readiness, CPP students perform even stronger, I think it kind of backs up what Shara says. The differential is much stronger. You really see the impact that CPP has when you look at those scores. So I know that's true with the background being less than 50%. Again, I don't have those numbers in front of me either, but if we just look at the ratio of CPP to non-CPP students and see the performance differences, it's just a really strong data point in support of what CPP can do.
And I will tell you, I think all early childhood educators in the goal have set the regional goal with the leadership of Cradle to Career and Success by 6, that our target goal is to have a minimum of 80%, right? Kindergarten ready, that is our regional goal. And that was taken by looking at the best schools and the best scores in our region and saying, let's aim to get everybody to the level that's the best at that 80%. So that is ultimately our preliminary goal. But of course, we don't want 80%. We want every child, because CPP's mission is every child. Right.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and move on to, if anyone else thinks of some more questions during our presentation, please feel free to raise your hand. Like we said, we like to be interactive, but we also want to respect your time. So we'll go ahead and move on.
Folks, Anne has her hand raised.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Let me be open and honest. They allowed me to have the privilege and honor to do the slides today on Zoom. Normally I'm on punishment to do this, but please forgive me. So if I don't see you, just bear with me for a second, but go ahead. If someone has their hand raised, you actually have the floor. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Annie. First, thank you so much for bringing all of this data. As a previous school leader, I really appreciated the specificity of the data and the overview. And like one of my biggest questions coming into this call was just kind of what are the trends and patterns you're seeing in the data with the difference from this year to the previous year because of COVID? Like, how are you adjusting to that? And so I really appreciate those two slides where you showed 1920 or previous year and this last year data. And so we saw a huge increase in math scores, but I noticed we saw like social and emotional drop. I mean, it's still at the 60s, but it dropped from like 80s to 60s. And so from your perspective, I think we can all kind of assume why, but is there next steps from your guys' seats of what you see schools should be doing to help our students in that capacity, and probably teachers as well?
So I'm so glad that you asked that. Thank you for making my job so easy, because that's what you will see in these goals, right? Our strategic goals that our board kind of gave us some oversight for. Here are the things, like when people say what keeps you up at night and trends that you see, it's that social emotional learning and development. Now, we're very fortunate that the Department of Education issued a comprehensive report, the US Department of Education, on October 28th, that kind of explains to people what that social emotional behavioral health need is, and calling all that mental health, which is not for some people, that's a very sensitive topic, right? And how we call it. And I think they made kind of a line in the sand to say, this is what we're dealing with, and we need to acknowledge that. And they did it in a very unique way, because they said, we need to deal with that mental health for educators, for administrators, for parents, for families, and for kids. And we can't look at one without looking at the other. And what we are seeing every day is an increased number of kids that are getting expelled from preschool, right? The number of teachers that are tapping out because of stress, a backward move in the developmental markers and things that you would notice as a parent, and maybe not as an educator, but our educators notice. Things like, I had a child who used to be able to stand in line and play well, and now they're getting in tussles. I had a child that was completely potty trained and comfortable with doing that, and they're not potty trained when they get back anymore, and they're out of their routine. We're seeing the results of that stress that I think are going to play out not only this year, but for years to come, right? It's particularly important to us because this is the first time this year coming up that we're able to measure the results of kids that receive tuition assistance from Preschool Promise at the 3rd grade reading level, right? And what is hard for us, and I think the job that Dr. Hindert has is most difficult, because we are trying to discern the impact that COVID and the pandemic has had on the advancement that we think this model has made, right? If you would have told me before the pandemic hit, proof of concept was a slam dunk, right? We knew that investments in these early childhood education had absolute payoffs. And part of that is because of the work of innovations in CPS, of having the only longitudinal study in the country that says, if you make an investment here, this is what it looks like on the other end, right? But the challenges that we see is in that social emotional development and how we do that. We see challenges in attendance, right? Because you will see the difference in a year-round education and the number of days a child attends. 10 absences is considered chronic absenteeism, right? Many times families are under so much stress that they can't attend. We have interruptions because of COVID, where a center or a site may need to close for 1 to 10 days. That interrupts attendance. This doesn't work if the child's not there, right? So that's my other concern. You can have the best school in the world. If nobody comes, it doesn't have the impact. And if they don't come consistently, the outcome looks very different. I think the last and kind of other important thing is, how do we continue to support our educators and our teachers who are also parents, right? Because we are seeing our capacity shrink every day because we don't have teachers, right? And we have pipeline strategies. Pipeline strategies are looking at teachers that are 2 or 3 years from graduation. That's not helping me tomorrow for a preschool classroom that we've invested dollars in, that people are on a waiting list to go to, but there's just not a teacher, right? So it is the making sure that we support and fortify our teachers, which in this country we don't have a history of doing, that we better step up now before we lose the last bit of educators that we have, and convince others to go in the profession. What we can do to make attendance easier, right? We know people always had transportation challenges. They always had quality gap neighborhood challenges, exacerbated by a pandemic. We've got to get families and children to take their kids to a high quality preschool, because access without means to the access is not access, right? It's just not. And then that social, emotional, behavioral health piece. So those are kind of the top three things. And I think, to be clear, we have these strategic goals, but I think some things that have happened kind of in the last 60 days need to make our mission as the Preschool Promise and our goals and priorities for the next year very clear. And that is stabilization, right? We are not looking at growth. We're looking at stabilization in the system. And so I think the goals of these that, I think call out the most are the new things that not only do we want to help providers reach high quality, but number 7, how do we help providers that have been there maintain high quality, right, at their sites? They're fighting as hard as they can. And how do we make sure that our equity policy is continued? How do we make sure that we address that family engagement and that social emotional health piece? Those are our crucial things to make sure we can make it another year, right? On the next slide, in addition to those strategic goals, you'll kind of also see the opportunities, well, one more, that we have for involvement, and that's workforce initiatives. If you know of anybody that even has an inkling that they may want to be a good educator, we got them. From earning credentials in 90 days to earning credentials in 2 years to going to a full-blown bachelor's or master's program, there is a place for you. We are begging for you. We will support it and we will help it, right? Cpp Ambassadors, people that we have throughout the community that talk to parents, that talk to providers, because the other thing is there are a significant number of preschool sites and providers in the CPS footprint that are not a part of the Preschool Promise, right? We would like everybody to be a part of Preschool Promise, and that means that you're willing to accept a child that receives publicly funded childcare. If universal preschool happens, that's everybody is going to be receiving publicly funded childcare, not just an income limitation. And then always looking to what our advocacy agenda is. As a nonprofit organization, we are not allowed to do lobbying. Our advocacy is really in a public information and awareness to keep organizations like this and others and our ambassadors aware of what's going on, right? And with that, I will say, making sure that we understand the distribution of ARPA funds and how that happens in the state. We know that last week, they just finalized at the Ohio legislature the release of the second set of funds that, $4 billion for the state that included money for childcare and education. What did the for stable that was approved in March, making sure that providers have access to that and families know what that means. Challenges to step up to quality, where we know a high quality education makes a difference, right? Our evidence shows it's what has an impact in getting kids kindergarten ready. And it's what has an impact in making sure teachers can get equitable wages, right? A provider that has not reached high quality, it's difficult for them to pay that level of wages. So that's another thing that people forget, why we continue to push for high quality, for the best opportunity for our families and kids. And making sure that that continues, because there is a study committee at the legislature that is talking about what are the alternatives, what does that look like, making sure they have the best information as they analyze that and make a plan for the state, right? They have to know what's happening for providers and what it means to families. And then this great anticipation that we all have for the Build Back Better Act, right? We all talk about universal preschool, and I think it's important that everyone be aware that the shape that universal preschool has to come in is that it has to be a model that serves not only public school classrooms and Head Start, but all community providers as well. Because looking at an equity model, the family childcare provider is as important as the public school preschool, right? Because the family childcare provider is the one that can be there before school and after school. It is an environment that some kids are better with a classroom of 6 instead of a classroom of 20. It gives parents the choice and meets the needs of children to make sure that we have a variety of type of preschool providers. And also that when we get to the Build Back Better Act, we're talking about now what's on the table, 6 years of funding. So you think Preschool Promise has been in business 5 years and it has not been the silver bullet to solve everything. So I don't want anybody to think we are grateful for that universal preschool, but it is a Band-Aid, right? Not a rescue plan, right? And to also think about how do we make sure that Ohio opts in? Because people forget that it is optional. Because the federal government appropriates the funds and makes them available, the state has to select to take those funds and how it's going to be used. And every state may not opt in to do it in the same way. And I think being aware of that and what all those triggers are related to that, to make sure that those billions of dollars don't disrupt what's already happening in the trajectory and actually support it. Because the true thing is that all of the funds that have come from pandemic relief, ARPA, the Build Back Better Act, it is supposed to supplement, not supplant, right? We're supposed to get better, not stay level. So just as much as we can talk to people and remember that. So I don't know if that answers your question, Annie, but is that helpful?
That was, thank you.
Yeah. So, and we are also open to ideas, recommendations that you all may have. Where do you think we should be and what should we be doing?
Absolutely.
I have one other question. And I'm relatively new to Cincinnati, so excuse me if I'm ignorant to this, but when you say not every school, sorry, that's my daughter coughing in the background. What are the challenges to getting more schools as part of CPP?
Right. So if a school, well, a couple of things, right? One, it is a certain amount of administrative procedure that you have to do. We try to make it as easy as possible, but it does have to be done. You also have to be willing to accept children that receive publicly funded childcare. And if you are at capacity, all of your parents perhaps have the capacity to pay your full tuition rate. Accepting children who may have vouchers, receive publicly funded childcare, have to do the paperwork and verification every year that is required of us with public dollars may not be attractive to you. And so those have been our challenges. And I think a lot of it is just, I don't think a lot of people realize when we say we go up to 300% of FPL, what that really means. I mean, sometimes that's for a family of 4. You can earn up to $79,000 and still get assistance from the Preschool Promise. And this is not our money that we're trying to give away. This is the taxpayers' money that said they want it to be used for this purpose, to support community providers and families, right? It cannot be used for anything else. It is solely designated for preschool expansion, and it is there for families. And so we try to encourage everyone, even if you don't think you qualify, complete an application. Give it a try, right? Because tuition assistance is just the start of what we offer, right? Back to school preschool jams, Smart Start packs, access to, special boxes and tools and learning and development opportunities for your family, discounts that we have and have brokered with different parts of the community on other things, new learning, alerts, text messages. All of that comes with being a part of the Preschool Promise family. And we hope in 2022 to be even more attractive. There are things that we're offering, particularly to small businesses, like free tax preparation we offered to some, for free membership in the African American Chamber of Commerce to be a revenue generating business, free promo packages, all of the things that say, how do we engage with you to come together? Because this is a network of community providers. And how do we help you transition to kindergarten? I mean, that was one of our most popular seminars last year. I'll tell you the 2 most popular: parents logging on to figure out what they needed to do to get their children enrolled in kindergarten, paperwork, administrative, and what's my checklist? Is my child developmentally ready, right? Do they need to count? Do they need the numbers? What do they need to know? The second one was talking about your child's health and vaccinations. We also run a series called Preschool Chat that is all issues about preschool that families may want to know. And families wanted to know, when is something closed? What does COVID exposure mean? What does vaccination mean for my family? Why are preschools open and schools closed? What's the difference? So those are things that we also do regularly, to have preschool chats where we say there's no dumb question. Anything that you want to know about the preschool environment as a parent, as a taxpayer, you come to that space and ask us. We'll hit the hot topics, but we're ready for anything. And if we don't have it, what I guarantee you is we will go get it.
Also to add to what Shara is speaking of, we actually have a preschool chat tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We actually do a Facebook Live as well as in our Zoom call. And tomorrow is Dr. Alexander Sims. She is an associate professor at University of Cincinnati of Pediatrics. And so we're focusing on part 2, and this is about our children's safety. How can we make sure our kids are safe? And it's things that is not necessarily just surrounded by COVID, but just in our everyday activities. How can we at least do our best to provide the adequate care for our child, no matter how young or how old, and even for ourselves, things that we could use as an adults, because if we're not well, then our children may not be well in that capacity. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that we do have our preschool chat. If you're not following us on social media, that's the Cincinnati Preschool Promise. We will do Facebook Live, and we want to make sure that you engage and share the information, because we can't do it alone. Like I said, we are only a team of 8 and 9, to be honest with you, 7, 8, 7. And, we try our best to be out in the community. Like right after I get on this call, I'm on with a community council. So I'm visiting community councils, but we need individuals like yourself, just as even not necessarily advocate, but just share the information. If we share the information, then we can say we did our best to get it out to the community. Marcia, I know you have your hand up. Go ahead and ask a question or share your comment.
Yeah, well, first of all, I get immersed in all this stuff, and I'm always excited when I hear you guys talk about the work, because it's very important. So I want to go back, though, to the advocacy thing, because that's what we are. We're an advocacy organization. And so we heard about the Build Back Better and the possibility of universal preschool, but what's on the horizon now? What's kind of near-term things that we need to know about that we might need to speak up on as an advocacy organization that wants to support the mission and vision of CPP?
I would encourage everyone to connect with an organization called Groundwork Ohio. Groundwork Ohio does nothing but advocacy, right? And they have permission to encourage that advocacy work and sway that political agenda. So we partner with them. So I think the things that are hot right now is that we know HB 169 got passed at the Ohio General Assembly. There is a provision in that not only appropriates money for childcare and preschool, but it also removes the qualification that a provider is required to have at least 1 star to receive publicly funded childcare. That causes us concern, right? Because 1 star is very important. It's beyond licensure. You can be open, but you have to develop some kind of quality standards. And so I think there is moves to say to the governor, we don't want to stop the bill and hold that up because we know people need this money. But think about if this provision is really necessary, particularly since you have appointed a whole commission to study the step up to quality. Let them do the work. Let them do the work. I mean, and that's what's happening at the state level, right? At the federal level, we believe that Build Back Better will go to the floor for a vote before Christmas. That's what we're hearing, right? And I think as much as people have means to do engage with Groundwork again at the federal level, there's still some conversation about what that's going to look like. How much money is in there for childcare and universal preschool and early childhood education. So it's not a done deal, because universal preschool could look like $300 billion and universal preschool could look like $1 billion, right? I mean, that's a game changer or a Band-Aid. And so I think it's important to be mindful of that. And then when the funds do get sent by the feds, just to be really vocal. And again, not about what we think, but what we've learned from families and providers, right? Our voice as Preschool Promise means nothing. It is what the families and providers have said they need, they expect, and they want for their families and children. And that is a model that supports not having to make the choice between feeding your family and food security and making sure your kid gets a decent education. Because please know, parents are making those decisions every day.
Wow. Wow. That's a happy thing to leave.
Well, I mean, the thing, the happy note I would leave you on, because we don't want to leave you with a discouraged note, is if you take anything away, take the success that we see in a double-digit jump in kindergarten readiness, the success that we see that we still had 740 families that were able to get their kids to preschool, that we had less than 5 providers who folded and shut during the height of the pandemic, but for Preschool Promise, you understand and know what the power of the investment of public dollars can be in supporting the early childhood education system. Right? There are only 7 initiatives like this in Ohio. What if everybody had that?
I know.
Right?
Right. It'd be awesome.
What is the difference that can make in disrupting what we see? Right? And I would say, remember that just like the community learning model that all public schools implemented years ago, that every community provider is a stakeholder and a hub for that community. So part of what they do in educating a child is also supporting a family. And whether that be food security in boxes that we sent out, parents looking for job opportunities, or just in many cases, the only friendly face that a working parent sees all day during the pandemic to say, hey, how are you doing? We're glad to see you. Here's your child back, safe and happy. Have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. So don't underestimate how community providers and preschools and childcare places play that role in the community as a connector for families, right?
Yeah.
And we can't lose it, because if we lose it, we can't get it back. Right.
It's so true. I want to invite anyone else from our education committee, if you want to just say a couple words or share what you might have gleaned before we wrap up here in a couple minutes. I see a couple of our folks here from our committee.
If I could ask a question, this is Elizabeth Brown. I missed the beginning of the presentation. I'm sorry, I had to slide in late. But one of my interests was how many, Shara, how many preschools did we really lose during the pandemic? I've heard just as small businesses, many of them could not stay in business. And if you could, not just the ones that are in your program, but overall in our community, did we lose a fair number of preschool programs in the last couple of years?
Yeah. So yeah, Elizabeth, you didn't miss anything from the beginning. It's all stuff you've been with us from the beginning. So that was a kind of our history that you helped shape. So I don't think you missed anything. I don't want to misquote numbers, but I can get solid numbers for you. I think nationwide, what we saw is like a 30% decrease in student enrollment. I know that wasn't your question, but it was doors shut. And the reason that I'm struggling, and I only want to give you hard facts on that, is that's something that we know our partners at 4C for Children maintain as the CCR&R and keep track, and they will have precise data on what the region looks like. And I make a commitment to send that back to Marcia so that she can distribute that to all of you to let you know what it looks like. It's also a dynamic that changes day by day, because while some people haven't closed, they've reduced the number of classrooms, they've reduced the number of seats they have in a classroom, or in some cases, they've consolidated. So if it was a multi-site center, they've closed down the center in one neighborhood and sent all the kids to another site, right? So we know for us of Preschool Promise sites that closed at the end of the pandemic, correct me if I'm wrong, Kenitra, I think we had 9, maybe 11. But those 9 were not all hard closures related to the pandemic, because some of those relocated outside the CPS district. Some of those chose to switch from family child care providers to sites, right? External business sites. So I'm comfortable with the 9 closure number, but that doesn't tell you the number of seat loss, and that doesn't tell you what's happening right now, because it's not over. And we have people that are on the brink. And so it's hard for me to celebrate a non-closure when I know places like, let's just forget, for instance, Water Lily used to have 6 preschool classrooms, and now they have 3. So no, they're not closed, but they don't have enough teachers to get to those other classrooms. And we see that ongoing as the workforce diminishes. And that's what the problem is. We have done kind of leaps and bounds with small businesses. And our goal has really been, I know the time is short, to really get our community providers to stop and not think of themselves as educators first, but to think of themselves as small businesses and entrepreneurs first. Yeah. How do you get to be a member of the African American Chamber or the regional chamber? How do you apply for PPE loans? So everyone that requested our support for PPE loans, we were able to get them a person who completed that application for them on the second round, right? What that shakeout is going to look like, we don't know, but we've had an investment from the Greater Cincinnati Foundation for our family childcare providers, not multi-sites or single sites, to say, we've done a 10-session series to say, how do we help you build your acumen? Hi! To make sure you are a better business person and don't go out of business, right? What is a revenue generating model that you have a mix of paying parents, PFCC, Head Start dollars, Preschool Promise dollars, infants and toddlers? What do we have to do to make sure that you stay open? But at the end of the day, closure is happening for two reasons. No teachers and nobody to work, and parents fearful of bringing their kids back to the preschool. That's what it is. We're not in a point where we're battling, do people see the value of early childhood education? That's where we were 5 years ago. We're done with that. Everybody sees the value. Whether or not they can get to it and feel comfortable in the space is the question. Right. You know, but at the same time, we also have new preschools starting in quality gap neighborhoods, because in some cases, there's more funds for new startup than helping a struggling business stay in place. Wow. So we'll get those numbers back to you of what it really looks like in our region. And I think I would caution you to say, don't look at site closure, look at seat capacity, fluctuation in quality seat capacity.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any last minute comments or questions before we close? This has been some awesome information, and I'm a little partial because I get to work with these folks a lot, both organizations, and I'm excited to be a part of both because I see the synergies that can happen between, you know, our Cincinnati Preschool Promise and the work and the mission and vision there, and us, the League of Women Voters, as being an advocacy, especially from the education standpoint, to make sure that our state reps, our federal representatives, people who are in leadership in our government, make the right policy decisions that keep things going for our families and our kids. So I want to thank you all so much, CPP team, and that includes Dr. Hindard and Laura. I see you there as well. Appreciate you all coming and sharing this information with us. We did record it, so we'll be able to send it out and put it on our on our YouTube page, so other people can hear it as well. And we'll encourage our membership to do it. In fact, in March, we are going to be embarking on a league-wide study about preschool and the impact of COVID across the preschool footprint. So that's going to be a focus for our league coming up this spring. So that's why we kind of want you all to come and kind of start us thinking about these things and start us looking at what's going on in even in our backyard. Hope says, yep, it'll be up tomorrow afternoon on our YouTube channel. So please invite people to look at it. So thank you all again for sharing. Thank you, fellow league members. It's good to see everybody out, and I pray everybody has a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you. Thank you, Hope, for your support always. Yay.
Thank you all.
Thank you
very much.
Good night, everybody.